So the title of this section is kind of digital video getting ready for prime time. So I want to talk a lot. I'm going to focus, because I come from the buy side, on cannibalizing TV dollars, because I think that's whether the overt or the subtle desire of everybody right now. Tell me the role that OCR plays in that, right?
Yeah, I think the question is not cannibalizing from my perspective. From everything we heard in the last panel, which was a lot of buyers.
I'm not good at subtlety,
right?
I'm sorry.
I think it's about how you effectively figure out how you move dollars to wherever the consumers are, right? And I think that's the ultimate answer that people are going to.
Well, yes, but the reality is that the data shows that there's not much. It's not like people are watching less television, right? Your traditional panels are showing that actually time spent. I think last year the stat was 22 minutes month over month was the average increase, right? So if people are just spending more time watching video and the dollars are fixed, at the end of the day, there has to be the shift of dollars from one bucket to another, right?
I think what's not clear right now when you look at digital video is where the shift is happening, right? So clearly there are TV dollars that are moving, right? Some of those are within broadcast networks, and simply, if you're watching the same show on a digital form as you are watching on TV, it's kind of the same thing, right? Some of it, I think, is probably moving from display into video as well, because it's a pretty effective branding mechanism. So I'm not exactly clear where the shift is happening right now. I do think over time, right, as you have comparability, what you probably end up seeing is some fracturing, right? And I would almost say it's less about video TV, and in some ways it's going to be more about content that commands a large audience, right? Versus things where you can buy kind of a spot form and get pick among smaller audiences.
Right.
If that makes sense.
And where does obviously social is a cornerstone sort of in online video, right? Where does the means by which online video was discovered come into the conversation, right? Because was it shared? Are you going to NBC.com to watch your videos? Like, where does that play into the perception as far as if you look at up funnel metrics for media for online video?
It's a huge question. I think it's almost more of a consumer question than a business question right now in a lot of ways. I think if anyone who's gone into the video on demand interface in your cable box, right, you know how hard it is to find something that's not a primary, one of the big programs that's being advertised, right? So I think to some extent that's got to be figured out. And when you figure that out, what ends up happening is maybe, and who knows, this is all prognostication, right? Maybe you end up getting more of an audience against content which was not highly advertised. But for now, I think if you're coming out with a big program, you're coming out with a Breaking Bad, you have it's in a place that's easy to find, and you can put marketing and budget against it. You're going to get a big audience against a single program.
Right. I think we talked in the last panel. A reoccurring thematic is the need of people to feel safe, and I think that's one of the great things that OCR does is sort of give a sense of comfort that you're comparing apples to apples, right? So if we've addressed that challenge and sort of tackled that, what's the next thing we need to tackle to really empower brands and agencies sort of from the perspective of buying and feeling comfortable and safe in their investments, but also in content creators and storytellers like NBC and programmers and broadcasters in doubling down on content, because stuff that's performing on linear TV is not the same stuff that's necessarily performing online, right? What's the next sort of battlefield for us?
Yeah, I think it has to be around understanding what's effective, right? So in Nielsen we talk about reach, resonance, and reaction. Resonance is brand impact. Reaction is driving actual sales, right? And I think that's got to be the next field, right? Because if you really think about it, I think the concept that you brought up in the last panel, I think it's come up a bunch, is trust, right? Well, why is it so much easier for me to understand the programs that are on NBC? Because I know the people on NBC, I know that it's going to be on TV, I know they have full episode players. There's a trust that comes with it. It's personal, and it's kind of a visibility into what's going on. When you move into the online world, there's a complexity, right? There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of ways that people can either on purpose or accidentally game the system, right? And I think all that erodes trust. But all that ultimately gets shown when you look at effectiveness, right? So I think at some point along the way, if and I don't think we're there yet in terms of getting everybody aligned behind reach. I think we're close, but I don't think we're there yet. I think the next battlefield has to be effectiveness or resonance and reaction.
Who, as far as adoption goes, do you feel that on the buy side of the business that OCR has been most sort of holistically embraced by the digital side or the TV buying side?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix right now, but I would say particularly among people that are integrating, right? I call it the Rosetta Stone. I was talking to a bunch of people today, the Rosetta Stone between TV and online, right? It's a way of translating back and forth, right? So that there's good parts and bad parts about each medium, but at least when you start putting that translation mechanism in there, you can start understanding it a lot better.
So when we bring, we bring the idea of rating points and audience, and we take that with the idea of addressability and targeting, this interesting thing happens is that the cost of an impression starts to ratchet up, right? And when you compare to sort of TV dollars, all of a sudden online video, when you're integrating data and targetability and addressability to that, but you're buying against an audience guarantee, and you kind of go down that funnel, and your approachable audience becomes less and less. The CPMs have kind of an inverse corollary, right? So how do we mitigate that sticker shock? Like, how do we deal with that? Because that's the reality of what is theoretically an efficient marketplace. But I think it's scaring a lot of TV buyers in particular when they start to get down to the brass tacks of the real cost of targeted online video.
Yeah, I think that's a complex question for a lot of reasons. I mean, the first one is if you look at purely on target rates, right, you could say that maybe costs are higher there, right? And what I will say is I think we came at this kind of a strange way from the online industry. And I think the industry started looking at this and saying, what's my on-target percentage, right? I think that was the wrong question. I think what you're asking is a better one, is what's my cost for the audience that I want right now. But the truth is, the reason I say it's complex, the truth is you might be going for one specific audience, but there's value to getting a larger audience as well. So there's the halo effect, right? And brands do consider that, right? When they run their media mix models to understand how TV is performing, within that, wrapped into that, is some amount of halo effect. And I think you lose that when you start going to this hyper targeted model, right? So yeah, I think there's some sticker shock, but I think ultimately over time, I think the important thing is to get whether you're highly targeted or less targeted, to be able to feed back your ads into some measure of effectiveness, and then you're going to start really seeing what prices you should be paying for things.